So how much potential revenue is sitting in your pipeline right now labeled as dead when it's really just delayed?
Oh man, that is the million-dollar question for most sales leaders. Or, maybe literally $1 million, depending on the pipeline.
Right, exactly. I mean, just think about your next forecast meeting. You've got a rep swearing up and down that a massive, like, six-figure deal is definitely going to close this quarter.
Yeah, because the initial discover calls were just fantastic.
Exactly. The prospect was super enthusiastic.
Wow.
All the buying signals were flashing bright green. So your team spends hours customizing a proposal. They hit send, and then, well, just absolute silence.
The buyer just completely vanishes into a black hole.
Yeah, and that blind spot in the forecast is exactly what we are dissecting today in this deep dive.
Which is such a critical topic because the immediate reflex on a sales floor when that happens is almost always the wrong one.
It really is. Reps usually do one of two things, right? They either quietly mark the opportunity as closed loss so they don't have to talk about it during pipeline reviews,
Right.
or they start this desperate, really high-frequency chase that actually just pushes the buyer further away.
Yeah, and that creates a massive forecasting headache for executives. You just have no idea what is actually real and what is just, wishful thinking.
Totally. So for our source material today, we are looking at a really brilliant piece by Nathan Davis from the Sales Experts.
Yeah, it's titled 7 Ways to Revive Deals That Go Cold.
And what makes this document stand out isn't that it's just some list of like magical email templates. It is this deep psychological breakdown of why buyers go dark in complex B2B sales.
And it draws from top-performing professionals in high-stakes sectors, like SaaS, AI, telecommunications, manufacturing.
The core thesis here is that applying these insights, it isn't just a band-aid for one struggling deal.
No, not at all. It is a fundamental shift in how your sales organization operates.
Right, because understanding the actual mechanics of why a buyer stops talking to you, that's a direct path to long-term sales success.
Master this, and the way your entire team manages a stalled sales lead, it just transforms overnight.
So let's get right into it. The most common reaction when a deal stalls is what I like to call the guilt trip follow-up.
Oh, yeah. We all know that one.
It's that painful email that says, just checking in, or, bumping this to the top of your inbox.
The source material actually identifies this as the single most destructive habit a sales team can have. The most destructive. Yeah, because the reason the checking in email fails so spectacularly is that it extracts energy from the buyer without providing any value in return.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. When a rep sends that message, they are essentially saying, I have nothing new to offer, but please take time out of your incredibly busy schedule to do my job for me and update my CRM.
You're forcing the buyer to do all the administrative work of the relationship.
Exactly.
It's basically the corporate equivalent of being on a really long family road trip with a kid in the back seat repeatedly shouting, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?"
That is a perfect analogy.
Like, it doesn't magically make the car drive faster. It just deeply, deeply annoys the driver.
Yeah, and it highlights the burden placed on the person behind the wheel, which is the buyer. We tend to view a buyer's silence through the lens of our own quota,
We think silence just means flat-out rejection.
Right, but in a complex, multi-stakeholder B2B environment, silence rarely means no.
What does it mean then?
It usually means they just lost internal momentum, like a budget got frozen or maybe a key executive resigned.
Or they just got completely buried in other work.
Yeah, or very often your internal champion took your proposal to their boss, got shot down, and they're simply too embarrassed to admit to you that they lack the political capital to get the deal signed.
Okay, wait, let me push back on that for a second. If we know they might be embarrassed that they lost control of the buying process, how does changing our email approach fix that?
Well, it's about how you frame the question.
But if a rep reaches out and asks if priorities have shifted, doesn't that just highlight the buyer's failure to get the deal done? Aren't we sort of letting them off the hook if we don't ask for a direct update on the proposal?
Not if it's positioned as a systemic issue rather than, a personal failure. A top-tier salesperson approaches a stalled deal with clinical curiosity, not pressure.
Clinical curiosity, I like that.
Yeah. When Nathan Davis suggests replacing that any updates message with a question that gives the buyer a graceful exit from their embarrassment.
Okay, what does that sound like in practice?
If you ask, has anything changed internally since we last spoke?
Okay.
You are handing them a face-saving excuse.
Oh, I see.
They can reply, yes, actually, our CFO just froze all Q3 spending. They don't have to admit they lacked authority. They can just blame the system.
Right. You were giving them a safe, totally non-confrontational way to restart the dialogue.
Exactly.
Okay, but if we eliminate the checking in email because it, drains the buyer's energy,
Yeah.
it creates a bit of a vacuum for the reps.
It does. They don't know what to send instead.
Right. If they aren't asking for a status update on the proposal, what exactly constitutes value to a buyer who is actively avoiding us?
So the source makes a fascinating point here about reps suffering from deal amnesia.
Deal amnesia.
Yeah. The second a quote is generated, the rep just forgets everything they discussed in the initial meetings.
Oh, wow. They forget the underlying business problem entirely.
Exactly. Deals stall out when the narrative shifts entirely from the customer's operational pain to the seller's closing mechanics.
So, to revive a cold opportunity, a sales leader needs to coach their rep to mentally travel back to that early discovery phase.
Right. You have to ask, why did this company take a meeting with us 2 months ago? What was bleeding?
And the article gives a highly specific framework for this.
It does.
Instead of a rep asking if the quote was signed, they should pivot back to the origin story of the deal.
Yeah, something like, when we first mapped this out, reducing your supply chain bottlenecks before the holiday rush was a critical priority.
Is that timeline still an objective for your operations team?
Exactly. Notice the mechanics of that phrasing there. It completely removes the spotlight from your sales quota and shines it directly back onto their operational crisis.
Because at the end of the day, buyers do not care about your end-of-month targets.
No, not even a little bit. They care about their own survival and their own success.
So by anchoring the conversation to their original pain point, you remind them why the status quo is unacceptable.
Precisely. You want to share something useful instead of just chasing them?
Let's look at this from the buyer's perspective for a second, though, because the source advocates for sending genuine value during a stall, right?
Right, like a relevant case study, an industry trend report, maybe a practical idea.
Okay, but if I'm a buyer sitting on an unsigned $150,000 contract and a rep sends me a white paper on market trends without even mentioning the contract,
Yeah.
doesn't that feel completely passive-aggressive? Like we're
Yeah.
both just awkwardly ignoring the massive elephant in the room.
Well, it only feels passive-aggressive if the insight you send is just generic fluff.
Generic fluff.
Right. If a rep sends some generic Forbes article, yes, it looks like a thinly veiled excuse to just pop up in their inbox.
Yeah, that's annoying.
But if the insight is heavily targeted, it actually functions as internal ammunition for them.
Internal ammunition. Okay, break that down for me.
Let's say your champion is fighting a really skeptical finance department to get your software approved. They are the ones stalling because they don't know how to win that internal argument.
Oh, I see.
If your rep sends a detailed case study showing how a direct competitor used your software to cut operational costs by 20% in 3 months, you aren't ignoring the elephant in the room at all.
You just handed your champion the exact weapon they need to slay the elephant.
Exactly. They can forward that case study straight to the CFO and say, look, this is why we need to sign this today.
So you're basically equipping them to sell on your behalf when you aren't allowed in the room.
Precisely. Exceptional sales professionals understand that their job doesn't just stop when the proposal is sent.
It shifts.
Right. Their job shifts to enabling the buyer's internal procurement journey. The average rep just demands a signature. The elite rep provides the business case required to justify that signature.
That structural understanding of the buyer's internal journey, that actually brings us to a massive invisible roadblock the source covers, which is process changes.
Yes, this is a big one.
You might have run a flawless sales cycle with the VP of engineering. They love you. But behind the scenes, procurement has quietly stepped in.
Or a new compliance board was just formed.
Right. And your contact literally isn't allowed to speak to you until they clear a whole new set of hurdles.
This is where a lot of pipelines go to die. The rep is talking to the right person, but they are suddenly at the wrong stage of a brand new, totally invisible buying process.
The buyer goes silent because they are just overwhelmed by their own internal bureaucracy.
Yeah. And the advice from Nathan Davis is remarkably straightforward here. Just stop guessing and ask directly about the machinery of their company.
So a rep should explicitly ask, has anything changed in your internal approval process?
Or, is there a new committee that needs to review the technical specs?
It's a very diagnostic approach. You are acting like a consultant trying to map out a workflow rather than, a vendor begging for a check.
Exactly.
But what happens when that diagnostic approach doesn't work? What happens when you've provided the ammunition, you've asked about the internal process, and the buyer is still just a total ghost?
This is where the source material introduces a tactic that honestly terrifies average salespeople.
It really does. It's called closing the file.
It is the ultimate test of a sales rep's confidence, the permission to walk away.
The template, when Nathan Davis provides, essentially gives the buyer complete permission to kill the deal without any guilt whatsoever. A rep sends a message saying, I appreciate that corporate priorities change rapidly. If this project is no longer relevant to your team, no problem at all. Just let me know and I'll close the file on my end.
If it's just delayed, I'm happy to reconnect whenever the timing is right for you.
Most sales managers balk at this. They think, why in the world would we ever invite a prospect to reject us?
Oh, I know. But the psychology behind this move is incredibly potent.
It sounds kind of like a pressure valve.
Mm.
Or even like the takeaway technique in dating or negotiating. Every time that rep's name pops up in the buyer's inbox, psychic pressure builds because the buyer knows they owe them an answer.
Right, they feel hunted.
Yeah. So closing the file opens the valve. It vents all that accumulated pressure, and suddenly it's safe for the buyer to communicate again because the threat of being sold to is completely gone.
That is the exact mechanism at play. Human beings have this deep-seated resistance to being controlled or pressured.
Absolutely.
When you remove the pressure entirely, you also trigger a really powerful cognitive bias, which is loss aversion.
Loss servant.
For months, the buyer has viewed you as this asset they can just activate whenever they finally get around to it.
But by stating that you are closing the file and walking away, you are threatening to take that asset away.
Exactly. You are communicating that your time is valuable and you are moving on.
You stop acting like a subordinate vendor and start acting like a peer.
And the results, they are often immediate. Instead of the buyer taking the easy out, they frequently panic.
Really? They panic?
Yeah, they realize they're about to lose the solution to their problem. They will reply within minutes saying, no, please don't close the file. We've just been trapped in a nightmare server migration.
Please call me next Tuesday at 10 a.m. so we can finalize this.
Right. They just needed the dynamic to reset. They needed you to stop chasing them so they could realize they actually still wanted to be caught.
That is a phenomenal tool for a sales team to have in their back pocket.
It is.
But the source material takes a sharp turn here that forces leaders to really look in the mirror.
Yeah, the mirror test.
If a sales floor is constantly having to deploy all these revival tactics, if every single week your pipeline reviews are full of reps trying to rescue ghosted deals, is it possible the deals were completely doomed from the very first phone call?
It is the hardest truth for a revenue leader to swallow. Chronic stalling is rarely a closing problem. It is almost always a discovery problem.
Wow. Okay, unpack that.
An opportunity usually goes cold because something fundamental was glossed over in the early stages of the cycle.
Like they didn't qualify early enough.
Right. Did the rep actually map out the true decision-making hierarchy, or did they just take the word of a mid-level manager who claimed they had authority?
Did they quantify the financial impact of the problem, or did they just do a flashy product demo?
Exactly.
Did they uncover a compelling event? Like, what happens to the buyer's business if they do absolutely nothing?
And if the answer is nothing really happens, then of course the deal stalled. There was literally no urgency to begin with.
The source actually cites a highly revealing data point here from the sales expert's proprietary tool. It's called the Sales Hunter Intelligence Evaluation.
Yeah, this is fascinating. This evaluation consistently tracks the behaviors of elite revenue generators versus, average performers.
And the data shows a really stark contrast. High-performing salespeople actually spend significantly more time in the messy early stages of qualifying an opportunity.
They are rigorous. They disqualify bad fits quickly. Average reps, they just rush through qualification just to get to their proposal stage so they can tell their manager they have pipeline.
They are essentially building houses on sand.
Yes.
And when the house starts sinking, when the deal stalls, they panic, which leads right into what the article calls the emotional discipline of great salespeople.
Top performers stay grounded. They recognize that enterprise purchases take time, executive boards move slowly, and corporate initiatives just pause sometimes.
But average reps lack this discipline. They interpret silence as a personal attack and immediately switch to desperation mode.
And that desperation destroys revenue. But, it's important to understand why this happens systemically. Reps lack emotional discipline because their environment often punishes patience.
Let's address the reality of that environment, because it's incredibly easy to sit here in a studio and say, just have emotional discipline, be patient.
Sure.
But sales managers and executives have quarterly quotas to hit. They have revenue targets promised to investors.
The board doesn't care about a rep's emotional discipline.
Exactly. They carry out the end-of-month forecast. So how does being patient actually pay the bills when the clock is ticking and people's jobs are on the line?
Look, it's a central tension of every sales floor. But frantic impatience simply does not scale, and it actively damages the enterprise value of the company.
How so?
Think about the mechanics of what happens when a rep panics to hit a Friday deadline. They start spamming the buyer. When that fails, they offer aggressive, unapproved discounts.
They completely commoditize your product.
Exactly. In the best-case scenario, they close a heavily discounted, poorly scoped deal that the customer success team hates, and the client churns in 6 months anyway.
They sacrifice the long-term health of the business to win a single immediate battle.
Right. And the worst-case scenario, which happens far more often, they permanently burn a bridge with a high-value prospect who is actually going to buy in Q4.
But they got so annoyed by the aggressive tactics in Q3 that they just went to a competitor.
Yep. So emotional discipline pays the bills because it preserves the integrity and margin of the deal.
Persistence in modern B2B sales is not about the frequency of contact.
No, it is about the quality of the commercial insight you provide during the delay.
Patient professionals, the ones who navigate stalls by providing internal ammunition and acting as strategic peers, they are the ones who turn a delayed 6-month timeline into a massive full-margin agreement in month 7.
That is exactly right.
If a VP of sales or a founder is listening to this right now and realizing their entire floor lacks this kind of emotional discipline, that their pipeline is just bloated with reps checking in, that is fundamentally a structural hiring and training issue.
It really is.
And that actually brings up a massive resource we pulled today's insights from. When Nathan Davis and the team at The Sales Experts don't just write these guides, they're structurally solving this problem for companies.
They are. If you want a sales team that naturally executes these strategies, you have to hire the right psychological profile from the very start.
Exactly. If you are an executive looking to elevate your revenue engine, or if you need to hire professionals who inherently possess this strategic patience and rigorous qualification skill, you need to visit thesalesexperts.com.
Yeah, they work directly with clients to build elite sales organizations, and they boast a massive 98% recruitment success rate.
98%, that's huge. They find the people who don't panic when a deal goes quiet. And while you are on the site, make sure to subscribe to the Predictable Sales Growth newsletter.
Oh, it's an incredible resource. It's packed with actionable insights on recruitment, leadership, and, scaling revenue without the panic.
Because the difference between a stressful forecast and a predictable pipeline usually comes down to the caliber of the people managing the delays.
It really does.
So let's distill all of this down into the immediate actionable shifts you can make with your team today. First, you have to audit your team's outbox and completely ban the just checking in email.
It is toxic to your buyer's energy.
Mandate that every follow-up must contain a piece of value or internal ammunition that helps the buyer sell the deal internally.
Second, coach your team to use the close the file technique to vent the pressure on stalled deals. Stop letting reps hoard dead opportunities just to make their pipeline look robust.
Teach them the psychology of loss aversion and give them the confidence to give the buyer permission to walk away. You will find out very quickly who is genuinely stuck and who is just never going to buy.
And finally, evaluate your early-stage qualification metrics. If an unacceptable percentage of your deals are stalling after the proposal, well, your reps are rushing discovery.
They need to spend far more time mapping out the internal approval processes before a quote is ever even generated.
Because predictable closing only happens after rigorous qualifying.
Which leaves us with one final thought for you to mull over as you pull up your CRM today. Look at the biggest stalled deal in your pipeline right now. Ask yourself honestly, is that opportunity actually frozen because the buyer's organization is stuck?
Or is it frozen because your team stopped solving their business problem the exact second the proposal was sent?
That is the mirror test every sales leader needs to take.
It changes everything once you do.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.